Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about A Haunting in Venice, the third film in the Hercule Poirot trilogy directed by Kenneth Brahagh and starring Kenneth Brahagh as this, mystery detective that is going to solve all these murders. And, this trilogy that has now been set has been really hit or miss for me because the first film, Murder on the Orient Express, I didn't really care for at all because I absolutely hated the ending. And I know it's a classic ending, it's a classic book, and maybe the original film in the 70s pulled it off better than that first film did, but I just really did not like that ending. Just rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't satisfying in the way that I like my murder mysteries to be. And when Death on the Nile came out, I wasn't very excited for it, but I actually did like that film a little bit more because it was more of a streamlined murder mystery, and the twists and turns in the last half of that movie were very entertaining, although the first half of that movie was extremely boring. And so I wasn't extremely excited for Haunting in Venice until I saw that first trailer, which you're essentially setting a murder mystery whodunit in a haunted house, and you're going to have a detective that is very skeptical of all these supernatural things, but he's also experiencing these supernatural things. And so it's a very much a premise that I love and that I was very much interested in. And if Kenneth Brahagh could pull this off, then this would easily be my favorite of the trilogy, and that is exactly what it is. A Haunting in Venice is still pretty much a streamlined murder mystery whodunit story. I don't think that the twists and turns in this movie are anything revolutionary to the genre like something like Knives Out was when that film came out, but it is still an engaging murder mystery, and the style infused into this movie by Kenneth Brahagh in terms of that horror flair that he brings to this movie really did elevate this movie to something that I really did enjoy. So let's get into all these spoilers in this movie because of course this is a spoiler review. So if you've not seen A Haunting in Venice and this sounds interesting to you and you don't want to see exactly what is going on before going into it, go check it out in theaters. I think it is an entertaining watch for sure, but I want to talk about spoilers, so let's just jump right into the movie. So what is A Haunting in Venice about? Well, essentially it follows Hercule Poirot, who is essentially retired from his murder mystery solving days. He's gone to Venice and he's essentially ignoring all these cases at his front door. He doesn't want anything to do with it anymore because he is so bogged down by all the death and by all the deception and by all the murder that he's experienced throughout his entire career, until Tina Fey's character shows up and presents him with a case that he cannot refuse because it's not a murder mystery. It's actually to disprove this medium that's going around performing all these seances that Tina Fey's character just can't figure out if she's a fraud or not, so she's starting to believe. So she's getting the second smartest person she knows underneath herself, of course, to try to figure out if this is a fraud or not. And of course, once you get into this haunted house and you meet all these people, of course a murder is going to happen, and then we're off to the races on a murder mystery set in a haunted house. So who dies first in this movie? Well, unfortunately, it is Michelle Yeoh's character, and I love Michelle Yeoh so much, and the small amount of screen time that she has in this movie, she really does make an impact because her character is fascinating because, she is a fraud in some ways. It is proven. She has these two assistants that essentially convince all the people around her that she is actually speaking to the dead, answering these yes or no questions, and it's a pretty good scam, but it is proven to be a scam. And she also has another assistant to do some other things, but at one point she starts spinning around the chair, starts speaking in the voice of the lost daughter, and so you just really don't know whether or not she was a fraud, and she dies before it can ever be truly solved. But maybe she wasn't fully a fraud. Maybe she was telling the truth, where these people, these assistants of hers, is just trying to express to everybody else around her that she actually can, to try to convince them in these supernatural ways. Because if she just speaks these things, maybe she's just lying, or how do you convince these people around her? And so maybe that is the truth, or maybe she is a fraud through and through. And I like that the movie leaves it ambiguous because you have a character in Hercule Poirot that is skeptical of everything, and by the ending of the film he has just a small hints of believing in all these different things, which I think makes his character a lot more interesting by the end of it. You also have Jamie Dornan as Dr. Leslie Ferrier in this movie, and I like Jamie Dornan quite a bit, and he was interesting in this role here. He was the doctor of the young daughter of the owner of this house, who is wanting this seance to be performed because her daughter died, and this doctor was on the case when her daughter was sick, experiencing all these hallucinations, thinking that she was seeing all these haunted spirits in this place, trying to get to her finally. And when she jumped off the balcony in her house, she is said to have died from these spirits living in this house rather than being a normal suicide. And so he also wants to truly believe what happened in this house, whether or not it was haunted, or whether or not he could have done something about this illness, or pretty much all these different things. He's also a war veteran, so he has this PTSD, which causes a lot of conflict with the other characters in this film. He also has a younger son because of course you gotta have a creepy little kid in a horror movie like this, and so this little kid plays this creepy kind of presence in the background that can say these really weird cryptic things. Maybe he can also see the spirits in this house. It's not really again confirmed because it is a murder mystery at heart, but there's all these supernatural things that happen with a lot of doubt given to them. But maybe if you want to believe, you can believe that this kid can actually see these spirits, but they play an interesting role as well. And I also really like Tina Fey in this movie as this mystery writer who has lost steam in her past few books and wants to write about this medium now to kind of spice up her writing career. And, you know, she is very interesting in this movie because she also plays a role in Only Murders in the Building as Cinda Canning. And that character in Only Murders in the Building pretty much has the exact same motives and the exact same, way, even though it's not writing, it's podcasting these, murder mystery, these true crime podcasts. And she is kind of a fraud herself, trying to fake these situations to get the better story out of her podcast. So I am, submitting to my own headcanon that this movie is a prequel to Only Murders in the Building, and that Tina Fey's character is playing her like great grandmother in this film, or I guess grandmother in this film, since it takes place after World War II. And so I'm just accepting that as true, whether it is true or not. Honestly, I think the timeline and the characters are so similar that it just kind of works in my head. But she also plays a good red herring in this movie because, again, she's trying to spice up her writing career, and so she has kind of asked Poirot to come to the seance to kind of spice up her own book because she wants to write a murder mystery, and she wasn't expecting the murder to actually happen, but once it did, she's an opportunist and she wants to, do all these things. She actually invited the boyfriend to the young girl who died in this house that they're trying to perform this seance to speak to, and she invited him because there's a lot of conflict with this guy and the mother and this whole family and the whole, I guess, trauma that happened with all these characters, and she invited him to add more drama to the situation. So she's really much an opportunist that wants to spice up her story as much as possible, which red herrings in a murder mystery is always good to have, and I thought she was a solid one. But let's talk about Rowena Drake and Alicia and her relationship with this guy in the past and what exactly happened with her death in the past, because that is really much rooted as the original mystery in this film. Or I guess there's three mysteries. There's the original setup of whether or not this seance, this medium, is a fraud. There's a mystery of what happened to this Alicia girl who was killed that was mysteriously, having these hallucinations, or was it actually spirits in this house that led her to commit suicide, or what is going on exactly in this house that caused her to die in the first place? And so there's that mystery. There's a mystery of whether or not the medium is a fraud, and then there's the mystery of who killed the medium in this current time. And so there's these three mysteries kind of running that all kind of stem from the mother of this movie, Rowena Drake, who is eventually revealed to be the killer in this movie. And I actually really did like this twist because of all the characters. There are a lot of red herrings. There are, Michelle Yeoh's assistants who maybe if they want to get out of her shadow and become the real, whatever, these characters actually didn't really have too much of a, I guess, presence in the plot at all, but they were also a red herring. Of course, you had the doctor character, you had the ex-boyfriend, you had all these characters, you had Tina Fey's character who had also had some decent motives, but a lot of these red herrings were interesting, plot devices to try to say, oh, they would be a good killer. But I think the most interesting choice of the killer is the mom herself, because in a lot of ways, she's the one that you expect the least. Why would she kill her own daughter? Why would she kill this medium? Why would she do all of these things? And it reminded me a lot of The Sixth Sense, which is pretty much why I would say that this movie doesn't necessarily reinvent the wheel in terms of murder mysteries. I love the horror style that's Kenneth Branagh brings to this film, but in terms of the story and the plot and the mystery itself, it doesn't necessarily reinvent the wheel, but it was a very much intriguing mystery that had a pretty good ending with her being revealed to be the killer. And why I say it reminded me of The Sixth Sense is because in Sixth Sense, you had the kid go to that one random house who this girl was essentially being poisoned by her mother until she died, and he finds the video of it and he plays it for the whole family. It's this really sad and haunting thing to kind of present to all these people. And it also kind of reminded me a little bit of Knives Out as well in terms of how this all went down, because essentially the mother was poisoning her daughter because she didn't want her to go off with this boy and live her own life. She was very much a controlling mother, so she was slowly poisoning her, getting her really sick, and this poison was essentially a hallucinogenic, which kind of caused her to have all these visions of all these spirits in this place. Whether or not those spirits were real, again, it's up to you, the audience member, but I think it is an interesting way to show her slowly poisoning herself. And the part that makes it extremely tragic is you also have the housekeeper that lived in this house who was, watching over her the night that she died, and she got really sick. She started having these, this episode essentially in her bed, and so she feeds her more of this honey that is the poison that the mother was giving her, and she essentially dies in an overdose. She did not actually die jumping off the balcony at all, and in order to cover her own tracks, that is what the mother did. She threw her off the balcony and killed her that way. And so it is was a very tragic ending. Like I said, Knives Out had a similar thing where, she thought that she gave him too much of a dose of morphine in that movie, and turns out that she didn't actually do that, and so it made it really tragic. If they didn't do anything in that situation, then maybe that guy would have survived the movie, and maybe this daughter would have survived if the housekeeper didn't give her this, medicine, essentially, because it wasn't actually medicine, it was poisoning her the entire time. So it just leaves a tinge of sadness and tragedy in this entire story that I did very much enjoy. Although, yes, I am comparing it to Sixth Sense and Knives Out, which this is based on an Agatha Christie book, so this probably came first, but again, it doesn't reinvent the wheel. I've seen it before in other films, but it is a good idea. Michelle Yeoh's character was also not the only death in this movie. The doctor also does die in this film, and that is also another way to throw us off of the trail of the mother, because, he is locked in a room because he had that PTSD episode where he fought the boyfriend character in this movie, and so they locked him in his own room. Nobody was able to get in there because there was the soul key that she gave to Poirot, and so nobody was able to get in there at all, and he also somehow dies, which also adds to the mystery of this all, whether or not this is the supernatural forces of these spirits actually killing the people in this place, which I do think was also a good touch to kind of add to that mystery of whether or not there actually is a supernatural element in this film. And that's when I want to get into the style and the structure of this movie, which I found to be easily the best part of the film. Is, Kenneth Branagh is great as his character. I love him as Hercule Poirot. He's been great in all three films, and this one in particular is really the movie that puts him the most on the edge, because he's experiencing all these supernatural things that he just cannot believe, and the way that it's filmed and shot really puts you in the shoes of this character more so than the other two films, with the way the camera is attached to him at some point. You feel just as nauseous as he does. You feel like these perspective shots when he's being drowned in the apple bobbing thing at the beginning of the movie as well. You feel like you're with him in his shoes, and you want to try to solve the murder of exactly who was doing that to him, why they would try to kill him in the first place at the beginning of the movie, why he is seeing the ghost of Alicia throughout the entire film, as well as a little girl or as somebody covered in water in the bathroom in this jump scare sequence. And the horror style in terms of the cinematography and the Dutch angles that Kenneth Branagh absolutely loves in his films was really effective here. And again, I think this style of this movie really does save it in terms of this movie kind of blending together in the whole vast world of murder mysteries you get in film. To set one in a haunted house and to have a horror stylistic flair to it was a great idea. And although this movie, again, wasn't the most drawing in terms of its mystery, it wasn't my favorite of all time, I think the style really does a lot to this movie to push it up there in terms of this trilogy itself as my favorite. And I love horror movies, and I love the style used in this film. I don't think it was necessarily scary at any point, and I don't think the movie was trying to be scary. I think some people might go into this movie thinking it's going to be a more straightforward horror movie from that trailer. I know a few people just did not know at all that it was connected to Murder on the Orient Express or Death on the Nile. If you've never seen or heard of those films and you saw the trailer for this before, like Talk to Me or something like that, and you're like, oh, this is a haunted house movie that I want to see, and you go in and you get a really heady murder mystery type thing that is kind of up to you of whether or not the supernatural stuff was real at all. And so I can see some people being disappointed in that aspect of this film, but I for one wasn't expecting a horror movie. I was expecting a murder mystery, and that's what I got out of this movie, so I did enjoy it out of that. But I can see some people being disappointed in this in terms of the horror aspect, because it wasn't a horror movie, it was a murder mystery that used the style and the cinematography from horror movies to elevate its mystery. And I thought that in terms of that, with Kenneth Branagh's purpose in making this the way that it was and the style that it was, he really did succeed at that. But I know I just went on this massive tangent when I was talking about the guy that randomly died alone in the room, if he was, killed by a supernatural force or not, which of course he wasn't killed by a supernatural force, because this movie's not going to prove anything with its supernatural elements in it. But I think the explanation to it was also interesting, because apparently the mother was being blackmailed this entire time, and she was getting all these letters, and somebody knew that she used poison to slowly kill her daughter over time, and so she wanted to get back at all the people that she essentially believed was responsible for this blackmail. And that is why she killed the medium in the first place, because she thought that this was a way to reveal that she was a killer the entire time. As soon as she got the hint that maybe this character knows the truth, she's going to go ahead and kill her. So that is her motive in killing the medium. And then once she finds out that, or she fully suspects suspects that the doctor is the one who believes that it was, this poison, because of course he was a doctor on the case. He would have seen in the autopsy and all that the cause of death would have been this poison element, and so she believes that he is the one blackmailing her. So she has him locked in the room. She calls him on the phone, which can't go out to anybody else. It can only do inside the landlines of this house itself, which is also how Hercule Poirot figures out that call happened in the first place. And so he gets this phone call. She threatens him to kill his son if he doesn't take his own life in order to protect him and to also wipe him out as the blackmailer in this situation. So that's essentially what he does. He stabs himself in the back and kills himself in this room alone, which also pushes the narrative of the supernatural element being in this film, which I do like that choice. Do I think it's as believable? I mean, yeah, you would probably, throw yourself in front of a knife in order to protect your own son. I do believe that. But what makes this storyline even more fascinating is it wasn't him who was blackmailing the mother. It was actually revealed to be the doctor's son who was the one blackmailing her this entire time, because he had this suspicion to him. He has this ability to kind of see spirits in general. And so whether or not you believe this kid to be able to see these spirits, he had this hunch and he checked his father's files and he saw what was happening. In order to, I guess, confirm his suspicion, he sent that blackmail letter to the mother in this situation and essentially confirmed it. And so it was actually the kid who was the blackmailer this entire time, which makes it also a little bit of a tinge of sadness and kind of, whether or not this kid was responsible for his father's death by the end of it. And there's a great moment at the end of the movie where Poirot leans down to him and said, "None of this was your fault." And I think that without that moment, I think that this storyline would have fallen a little bit flat, but because there was this connection with this kid and him leaning down saying it wasn't actually your fault and you did nothing wrong, and just that tinge of sadness that is held in this movie, I think also did elevate this to my enjoyment of this one being a little bit higher than the previous two. But that is going to be it for my review for A Haunting in Venice. If you guys did enjoy this review, make sure you guys leave it a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. And we are getting close to October. We've been getting all these different horror movies in the past couple weeks, which has been great to kind of get into the spooky season. And I do usually have this 13 Days of Halloween series in October where I get into a bunch of horror movies, and I feel like it's already started in some ways because there's been so many horror movies in recent weeks. So honestly, maybe this is a part of my 13 Days of Halloween, so subscribe to see more horror reviews throughout the rest of the months. In 2 weeks, I think we have Saw X, so I think that's going to be the next one, probably kicking off the official 13 Days of Halloween, but I'm very excited to talk about more horror on this channel with you guys. So again, thanks for watching this video. Leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment down below of your thoughts on A Haunting in Venice, and I hope to see you all in my next one.